welcome everybody to our e-commerce Jamstack panel. I'm really happy to have you here. Thank you all for making time for us and for the JS World Conference. This is such an amazing lineup that we're going to have, and I cannot wait anymore to have an exciting conversation with you. And I would like to ask you, Gift, if you could maybe introduce our wonderful panelists.
Yeah, sure. Today we have Tim Benix, who is joining us from Uniform, as he works as a developer relations advocate. And we also have Philip, who is the co-founder and CTO of VueStoreFront, and Ishan, who is also the co-founder of Moovweb, and Bill Cuscio, the director of solutions at Vercel. Very nice to have you all join us for this panel.
What an amazing powerhouse we have here. I'm really getting like chicken skin right now just from thinking about this.
Boy, we better deliver now.
I would like to begin with one question to get the conversation started and break the ice a bit. And for that, I would like to start with you, Bill. What is the target audience of Vercel in the e-commerce space? If you could think about that and maybe tell us what is the strength that you offer for that, and we can then go around the panel to hear the same from everybody.
Great. So e-commerce, I would like to first start with understanding a bit of e-commerce. So e-commerce is like the quintessential example of the web. Like it tackles all of the issues that developers will ever have. Like you have problems updating the UI, you have problems reaching correctly, polling correctly, fetching to an API, you have to maintain state, you have styling issues. There's a lot of things that you need to address when you have an e-commerce, right? So the way we see it at Vercel is that we holistically support pushing amazing products to the web. So in that realm of amazing products, this quintessential example exists, and it's e-commerce, and we completely cover all of the possible strategies towards e-commerce. For some e-commerce that don't change quite that much, there's a lot of things from the Jamstack features that we can support. So static, as we all know, you can ship static sites, as well as if you ship with Next.js, incrementally built as you go. And also server-side rendering as well. So there's a fully hybrid approach that we take with serverless functions, and that allow us to basically run on the edge, so in multiple regions as we please around the globe, and fetch data from whatever data source we choose. So what that means is that we support the web, and on that realm is e-commerce, and we completely support it as well. So Vercel guarantees the full pipeline of experience for front-end developers in order to deploy their projects to the web. And we try to make sure, and also my team, the solutions team, tries to make sure that those solutions scale, they have success when they are in production, and also the platform guarantees that as well.
Quite a complete explanation from the Vercel point of view. Front-end developers would be then the audience, let's say, that you're mostly catering to as a platform.
Yeah, we are seeing a huge blend into the users that reach our platform. There's much more ownership over content and QA engineers. So for example, with Vercel, you can ship your own static URL with multiple deploys, and also strategically pick, for example, that a specific branch can have a certain campaign that no one knows of. So that link can be shared with QA engineers, and they can they can stress test that. So also users can be like bots, if you can think of it, because you can stress test an atomic build as much as you like. So the way to think about it is that it's pretty broad, the land that we tackle, and we plan on expanding more on that realm. We want the full, we want the full collaboration. We believe that the web is for everyone, and everyone should take the advantage of enjoying the web, not just developers, as much as we love it. it's a nice feeling.
I really love that sentiment. And I think that's also one of the reasons why you started the VueStoreFront, Philip, back when, well, I will not probably tell the story for you, but from what I know, it started in this kind of also trying to enjoy developing something for the web and for e-commerce, right? What can you tell us about the VueStoreFront and the audience that you're trying to reach with it?
Okay, so maybe let me start with the backstory. So not that long ago, I think even 10 years ago, when anyone wanted to build an e-commerce, an obvious choice was to pick a platform that is actually giving you everything out of the box, like Magento, like WooCommerce. They were giving you things related to order management, to marketing, to email marketing, taxes, CMS. Actually, everything was packed into this single vendor. And over time, what we have seen is that any companies started to rise that were API first and that actually approach this topic differently, because instead of being a vendor that is focused on doing everything, they were focused on very small things. And over time, we saw that our clients were deciding to replace certain parts of their stack with this particular vendor. So instead of using Magento CMS, they were using Storyblock. Instead of using like maybe some built-in software for taxes in Magento, they were using TaxJar, etc. And over time, it became more and more complex, and people were using more and more services, and it wasn't that easy to combine all of them. So that was the first challenge. And another challenge was that even if you were combining all of them, at the end it wasn't actually your platform anymore. So if you were using Magento and you were using a dozen of other services, can you say that you're actually using Magento? No, you're basically using Magento mostly for the catalog, maybe for the checkout. So people started to decouple front ends from the backends and using this old traditional platforms, just like a single vendor for a single specific task, actually. And these front ends, they are becoming really, really complex applications. They're right now as complex as these backend vendors. So obviously we need some kind of tools that are allowing us to build this easier. And this is exactly what VueStoreFront is. So when we were building e-commerce headless frontends in Devante, a company that VueStoreFront is originating from, we saw that we're actually doing a lot of repetitive work. So we started by just pushing a boilerplate project to the GitHub, because like initially VueStoreFront was just a boilerplate for e-commerce. And over time, many people joined because they also had the same problem. They didn't want to start from scratch. And over time, it evolved into framework. And right now, our main USP and our main, I would say, reason of existence and what we're trying to help with our clients is basically to shorten time to market, because this is taking a lot of time to develop such things, and we're giving them different tools to this. So there's VueStoreFront itself. We also have a UI library called Storefront UI. On top of that, we have a cloud offering that is helping them with hosting, CI/CD, monitoring, and stuff like this. So our goal is basically to make this thing as quick as possible and as enjoyable and seamless as possible. And we're doing this for all the backends right now, and not only e-commerce, but also CMSs and all the other related ones.
Also, in this way of trying to expand to get more, offer a more complete approach, I recognize that. And what I've heard just now from both of you is really oriented to the development and the putting together part of the e-commerce development pipeline. But I also know that Moovweb, for example, and Ishan, I would like to hear a bit from you on this side, all this complexity of integrating different approaches and trying to, integrate with different providers on the back end as well, can lead sometimes with a perceived performance hit, right? Moovweb specializes, from what I understand, in optimizing that side. What can you tell us a bit about Moovweb and what your target audience in the e-commerce side is?
Yeah, so we're a Jamstack platform. Our jam is bringing the benefits of Jamstack to large dynamic websites, and so we support all the common frameworks. Nuxt, Next, VueStoreFront. Also, a lot of e-commerce focused ones that, like, for example, SAP has a framework of their own called Spartacus. that only works with SAP Commerce Cloud. So we support that as well. And for us, we're really focused at I'd call it the higher end of the market, right? Take the e-commerce space. You've got your, you got WooCommerce and Shopify kind of at the low and mid market, and then at the higher end, you've got Salesforce Commerce Cloud or SAP Commerce Cloud. And we think the same thing will actually also happen in the Jamstack space as well. And so we're really focused on the challenges those guys are having, taking the benefits of Jamstack and bringing them to, for lack of a better word, classic or legacy stacks. So we're kind of marrying those newer modern frameworks like VueStoreFront and Next with stacks like Magento, SAP Commerce Cloud, ATG, Oracle, and the like. And for these large websites, they have unique challenges and unique needs. The most common thread between them is they very often have large numbers of pages. And very large catalogs. So classic, build times can become a problem. A/B testing is super critical for these folks. A/B testing is easy to ignore on a smaller site. If you look at the statistics, 1 out of 10 in the top 1 million sites uses A/B testing. But if you look at the top 10,000, it's 50%. 1 out of 2 is using A/B testing. You need to demonstrate ROI, so it's really critical there. And then the last thing is performance is super critical for these folks because better performance can mean better conversion rates. And even a small increase in conversion rate can have a really outsized impact when you're dealing at high revenue multiples. And with Google's Core Web Vitals update coming in May, performance is going to get even more important. So, for the average e-commerce site, Wilco Digital says around 50% of your traffic comes from search engines. And Google's basically saying speed will now be a concrete ranking factor. So it's now even more multiplicative in its benefits. And so that's a lot of the things that our platform is really geared to help customers solve.
And you touch a very important point there. The performance that we're seeing and the web essentially is continuously evolving because of new browsers, because of new devices, because of the possibilities that are out there. That integration and that sort of meta integration even between systems that allow us to build powerful e-commerce solutions, that comes with additional complexity itself. Like there are aggregators and there are other solutions as well to try and put together these players in space. And I know Team Uniform is one of them. What can you tell us about what Uniform does and what the target audience is as well?
Well, the funny thing is, Uniform kind of sits between all the stories that Philippe, Ishan, and Belle just kind of explained. Like, essentially what Uniform is trying to do is to help orchestrate all the stuff that comes together when you compose your architecture, right? So a VueStoreFront on a Moovweb, and then put it on Vercel or maybe keep it on Moovweb or whatever, all of that stuff. They aim to kind of help the orchestration. And then there's a whole bunch of extra context, like Ishan was already touching on, like A/B testing or personalization, data tracking to see how that personalization worked, all that extra stuff on top of just your website. That's what Uniform also wants to try to make easier. And basically from all those things, trying to remove the origin and doing everything in serverless, right? Or in edge workers, things like that. So you're more flexible. And so that's the one part. And just like Moovweb, we are more on the, the more enterprisey level. And so the other part of the business, which is still pretty huge, but it will slowly be a bit less, is there's a lot of big e-commerce and big websites out there that cannot just say, okay, we have a 1 million euro contract for 5 years or maybe 10 million. We're not just going to drop that stuff and go VueStoreFront. It's pretty hard to do that, right? Because you have all these stakeholders you have to talk to, and like, how do I manage to get that stuff there? So when I worked at agencies, what we always used to do is put a lot of effort, a lot of money and expertise towards those older systems or legacy systems, or however we want to call them nowadays, to make that front end awesome. And actually Uniform kind of made that into a product. So if you have an old school, let's say Sitecore 8 website that is huge, you want that to be Jamstacked because you know what? It's really slow. Well, it's not, it doesn't have to be slow, but it costs a lot to make it fast, and hosting is expensive, right? So Uniform now made some sort of handler and some fancy software to put that built on Vercel and actually deploy it on Vercel, but you can still use your old system. So this is actually a pretty big part of what we're doing now. And you can see more and more of those higher enterprise level customers are like, oh boy, we have to go into Jamstack. Where do we start? And then I just joined this company, right? And my friends are looking at this like, whoa, this exists? Yeah, I'm going to talk to my boss now because I want Jamstack.
We have been needing this, yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we're generally using Next.
Okay.
So it uses Next to show the pages, and it grabs stuff, but it also works with Nuxt and others. But Next is a really good one for this because it integrates so nicely to Vercel, for example. And what you see is like you have your old pages that are just static, even still maybe, you know what, with jQuery. And then it's just taken as is, put into Next and served statically. But you can also say, okay, that component, I'm going to build a React component from that one in Next. And I grab the data from another place. And then slowly over time, you basically build a Next Jamstack website. And then the old system can slowly go away. So it's kind of providing a safe path that your boss doesn't want to fire you for towards the new stuff, basically. And so this is the two parts. And over time, all those contextual things inside this experience platform that is not just your website, but also analytics, personalization, all of that stuff. I think Uniform is going to jump on that and help more of those things. So marketeers are also happy, not just developers. So that's a long story to say we're talking to developers and stakeholders in these huge enterprise e-commerce places.
Thanks for sharing, Tim.
Sure.
So going beyond the Jamstack, a lot of companies may perceive static generated sites as a thing you can change or adjust on the go. So what are some strategies you can highlight to showcase flexibility of Jamstack e-commerce? Philip, do you want to go first?
Well, actually, what I think is that Jamstack e-commerce is not that much flexible at all. Because how we are approaching this right now and how it usually works. It usually works like this, that you have a list of products, a list of SKUs, and you're generating your pages for these SKUs. And whenever something in your product catalog is changing, then you're regenerating all your pages. And then you're putting them again on a static hosting, right? So actually you have to invalidate all your pages every time you change some content. And this is not that much flexible, but what is like in terms of this maintenance? But where I see the flexibility of Jamstack is the fact that it's super quick. It could be hosted actually anywhere, which is amazing because right now all the applications are getting more complex and complex and complex. And Jamstack e-commerce is going actually one step back and says, hey, like we could do this as HTML websites, and it will work exactly like it's working as PA, yes? So this is where I see the biggest flexibility in terms of hosting, in terms of delivery, because we can also quickly deliver this to actually any device, and we don't have to worry that much about computing power of this device or even about bandwidth. This is amazing, but I still think like in terms of development itself, there are things to improve.
Mm-hmm. One thing that Tim mentioned over there was also the possibility of having, for example, Edge render or integrating with all of these amazing set of tools that we have out there. And this is something I think that plays particularly well in a scenario like what Vercel offers with server-side rendered routes. What are some ideas that maybe you can share with us, Belle, about how Vercel tries to tackle this flexibility perception in the Jamstack e-commerce scenario?
Great. So what we are noticing and how the trend goes is that the web development pushed that computation to the edge. So the monolithic pattern require the request to land the origin and execute that function at the origin level and output that function and put all that latency into the user. So the amazing trend that I think Jamstack unlocked is that the front-end developer finally has a lot of ownership into understanding how caching works, where your code is at, where are you deploying without thinking of multi-region deployments and infrastructure and orchestration when you're building your product, and understand that that execution can be put near the user. And if there's something that I think the pandemic left us in the sense of e-commerce, is that we need to go to market like really fast, because it can affect like real stuff. Like it's no longer like a joke. Like it's not about pushing something online and just expect how it works. It's something more real and tangible now, I think. A business can go out of business just by returning a 500 at a critical moment in time. So the way I see it is that the front-end developer has now much more ownership into shipping that rendering functions across the globe, and finally have that user have that fast experience that they deserve. In terms of Vercel, everything is covered by Vercel. You can pick where to have those functions rendered at the edge. And also, for example, if you, the example of, for example, using eCommerce and knowing where that API is at or where those servers are at, you can execute your serverless function near that data source, so we can push those to the edge and just have a blazing fast like experience. But that also is an implementation layer. I mean, there are a lot of, I don't think that there is a silver bullet. I think this ecosystem is systematically evolving. So something that could work for some, like static rendering, incremental rendering, cannot work for a lot of other people. Like, for example, the finance and e-commerce, there's a portion of that audience that can be really sensitive to stock changes or price changes. And that requires some effort on the client side and engineering to make sure that they are shipping and we are shipping trustworthy products, trustworthy assets, trustworthy pages. And so what I think is that there's no silver bullet, and the ecosystem is constantly evolving towards finding what fits best for the industry, the audience, and the product.
I think, though, Moovweb is really close to that. Aren't you guys doing this as basically your specialty, Ishan? Yeah,
so, I would say the short answer is that's what my talk at JS World is really about.
There we go.
And what I'd say broadly is, solving this problem, as Belle said, it's a mix of things. It's a coordination of server-side rendering, incremental rendering, client-side rendering, and edge logic. And it's a judicious choice in each use case, which one you're going to apply where. So, some of the things that are novel that our customers have, pushed us to add into the platform are things where, the classic Jamstack platform, clears the entire cache out on each of these unique branch deployments, right? And every single URL, every commit you get your own URL for. And when you roll it out, the entire cache clears. If you've got millions of pages, you don't have to rebuild every single one of them if the traffic distribution is following a power law. So, some of the solutions we've got involve, actually doing the deploy first, and then actually builds happen asynchronously, or not clearing out the entire cache. And we talk a little bit about that in the talk, but it's very kind of use case dependent. What I think is most helpful is to actually reframe the conversation. And I have a different view of the definition of Jamstack, I think, than the classic one. And that's, if you break down the benefits of Jamstack, they really come down to just two things. Front-end developer empowerment. So letting the developer do more with less, zero DevOps. That's why serverless is so big. It's scalability a front-end developer can love because he doesn't have to worry about it. And then bringing data to the edge and serving data to the edge. So, when we've been at helping this type of high-end enterprise e-commerce site for a long time, and we'd tell them to do things that you do classically in Jamstack, where you would, late load, say the cart count or the welcome Bob, welcome back, and people wouldn't do that. What Jamstack really forced people to do was write their front end code in a way that it could be served from the CDN. The build step is a red herring. What the real value of the Jamstack is that you're serving data from a CDN and from the edge. Tim said earlier, there's a really good point about people are going for performance. When you're in these, high-end, dynamic websites, you've got to demonstrate ROI. They're not going to Jamstack just because they like it. They're going to it for performance. And so anything that brings data and serves it from the edge is going to improve performance and is going to be why people migrate there. And when you take that view of things, there's actually a variety of architectures that are possible under this broader Jamstack definition than just build times.
Yeah, we noticed this also. It's
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Sean. Now it's interesting how you said that, because at Uniform, when we basically explained to those people in enterprise, hey, use Jamstack, do this and this, and they're like, oh, Jamstack, that's new. Oh boy, I'm going to have to change everything now. Oh boy. And then we actually explain, no, you have Azure, right? You have a blob storage, and then you build, just do something else. You just use our servers in between, and you can still keep all your fancy Azure stuff that you had anyways. And so you can explain it differently, but it's still Jamstack.
There's also a couple of things that Jamstack does not protect you from. So you're still shipping a huge JS. And there's no way, even though that you could be covered by statically analyzing the code and shipping a fully static version of it, you sometimes are not completely covered. You can be covered by a framework. Sometimes it's a case of Next.js. I could cover some aspects of it. But as I like to say at Solutions, and when I talk to clients, is that we cannot trim code for you. If you're shipping something to the client and it's not needed, we cannot do anything for you. So in that sense, I think that Jamstack is useful, but for its pureness, for its atomic ability of it. You can just ship a continual thing to the CDN that we didn't have that before. You should have to ship an entire serverful implementation to a fully fledged server and pick between providers and not knowing what it was going to happen, fully covered with side effects. So in terms of how Jamstack protects you, sometimes I don't think it's that powerful into how you're protecting the user. So you can ship a lot of things to the user that they don't need. There are a lot of computation, and the leverage of network versus CPU on the client sometimes is not good. And again, that's on the developer as well, because there's a lot of things that the developer can pick, like, okay, I will pull these updates, I will server render this, or there's a lot of strategies on the rendering pipeline, right, to pick from. Mm-hmm. So I think we are going towards something more hybrid, because otherwise, I see why we needed Jamstack so bad, but we need a better primitive of Jamstack, that it's the function of Jamstack, not the output of the function. So what I mean is that Jamstack, your app is a bit function, and the output is what you ship to the CDN, but we need the function in order to generate A/B testing, personalization. We need the source again in an efficient way. So we need the best of all of the patterns that we had before.
Oh yeah, that's such a good one, because I have an example of this that I just learned yesterday because I just started this company, right? We're doing a lot of personalization, which is a pretty complex to do if you look at the enterprise world, because it's so huge and it's hard to scale up and make fast. And so what these guys did in Next.js, they have personalization with contentful on hydration time. Well, that's all fun and games, but if it's a little bit slow, you might have a little loader and then your thing personalizes. I'm like, it's almost cool. But now they used, I'm not sure which service, but they used an edge worker to kind of server-side render just that small bit that is personalized for you. So if you don't have JavaScript, you still get the personalized thing for just that route for you as a user. And so this is kind of like exactly, Bell, what you're saying. You kind of get the power of the Jamstack, but then you need to go beyond and not do it on hydration, but actually do it in a different way. So HTML is rendered, and that's it.
Absolutely. And also, like, in adding to A/B testing, like, there's a lot of misconceptions that A/B testing is just two versions or 3 or something that you can replicate. It could be a whole realm of combinations. And if you want to go deeper on that, you can also have an ML engine that just can sort out your UI for you based on region, on preference, on whatever. So the moment we have more ownership on that realm, to make like front-end engineers like being like owners and creators over that space, to make them able to shape and shuffle the deck as they like, I think that will be like another point where we change the north. I guess
this is actually something I touched on in the talk a little bit, which is that we think of personalization as very unique and limited, but a lot of large sites do some form of segmentation, even just country or language. You're going to have different versions of the site. And that's where it becomes really important to make those capabilities, exposed to the developer in a very easy to consume manner. And, the other thing that you touched on, I think was really worth noting, which is that, Jamstack is not automatically fast. There's a great article that I also referenced in the talk called, Jamstack is only fast if you make it so. When it comes down to it, a page is only slow for 2 reasons. You either run out of CPU or you run out of bandwidth. You're either CPU bound or network bound. And the Jamstack solves the network bound by serving data from the edge. But the CPU bound is on your JavaScript and making that fast. And that's where tools like RUM are really important and Core Web Vitals, so that you can know how real users are encountering the speed of your site.
I think you're totally right, and I also love what Bell said, because I think like Jamstack itself, it's not like ultimate solutions to all the problems. This is actually, to me at least, this is kind of like an answer to the problem. And this problem is the fact that we started building all these SPAs with a promise of delivering much better user experience. Also, PWAs are guilty of that. So we all jump into the JavaScript hype train, started to ship enormous bundles to the front end, because like building single page applications to many means that, okay, so I'm building everything on the client side. And we're shipping a lot of JavaScript. So then we needed another pattern that will maybe not enforce something, but at least promote a way of building sites that are now without JavaScript, at least like theory. So I think this maybe not represent, like Jamstack maybe not represents exactly the way where we should go, but represents a problem that happened in the industry and also represents the solution, at least to some degree.
In a way, everything that was old is new, right? I see this when we are conducting some interviews with potential colleagues. It's a similar question, like what is the difference from the Jamstack to just writing HTML and CSS? And it's important what you all are saying here, the taking back that ownership and really knowing what you're delivering to the clients is really valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting because we want that experience that we had in 2005 where you can just write HTML and just ship that. I miss those days so much. I started to code like really young, and I just clicked one tiny like globe, and it was it. Like I was online, and we want that, but we also don't want the complexity that brings working with components, working with a massive company to share components across your entire company, share correctly assets, build statically some assets. So we want that experience that was so easy to understand HTML and CSS and modify the UI, but at a higher scale. And I'm really happy, I think, and I feel blessed for Jamstack, because it really was I think a really good attempt to solve that. Hey, we cannot continue to ship a lot of things that had a lot of side effects, and the moment something goes down, everything goes down, because it technically doesn't make a really nice, good sense. But it was a really good attempt, and it continues to be a solid attempt. So, but we clearly, if we build around Jamstack, then there's clearly a need to improve that. And I feel that.
You know what I would love to do is, oh, sorry, go ahead, Nishan.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think the takeaway here is you're hearing that Jamstack, or a definition of it, needs to evolve to continue to
Yeah.
solve the problems we're facing in the front end. Tim, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say the same. Actually, I wanted to build a Jamstack website without the J, like we used to do, right? And that's what we kind of tell our clients at Uniform, right? Because back in the day, we didn't need Java. You don't need JavaScript for an enterprise website. You just need to render
JavaScript
something.
is full interaction. Like if we think of why JavaScript came to a picture, it's because someone pushed away Flash, and we desperately want ownership over that interaction, right? Yeah. And JavaScript, it's a language of the web in terms of how to shuffle interaction, how to bring immersive and in immersive interactions with the web. So I'm totally with you. Like I would love to have just markup and APIs.
I think we want that development environment. I think what's emerged and pushed the single page applications back to the fore was anybody, whether you're competing in the attention economy and you're competing with everything else that's on that phone, right? So if you're an e-commerce site, your competition isn't like the other guy selling the same thing. It's Netflix, it's YouTube, it's TikTok, whatever else. And those are really powerful, immersive experiences that are really fast. And people consume their phones in micro moments. And so it became really important for mobile sites especially to have that same kind of rich interactive feel and still be instantaneous. And it's really hard to deliver that in a purely HTML manner on browsing transitions. You can get that with single page app, but your first load is kind of slow. So it's a delicate balance to get right. And it's, at this point, still too hard. And I think there is some emerging recognition of this. And there's some proposals that have come and gone and maybe reemerging around, built-in browser, transitions that feel like a single page application. Don't repaint the whole screen. In a way, Portals is a good example of this as an emerging spec that the Chrome team is pushing. And we might see in the future a way to get back to a development that's more like the classic, just HTML with less JavaScript, while still getting that immersive, really fast UI that can compete with native apps on the user's device.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Speaking of evolving and seeing that we're nearing the end of this panel, I would like to ask, 10 years ago, the predominant architecture was backend heavy and tightly coupled. Nowadays, we have more open and distributed presence. So how do you see this evolving 10 years from now? Do you have any predictions? Philip?
Well, I'm not that good at predicting things, but considering that we are running in circles right now, I think in 10 years, we'll be probably just shipping HTML.
I thought
there
maybe
will be
just
some
Java
kind of a browser API.
No, not again.
Yeah, perhaps there will be some
Flash?
kind of browser API.
Hipster websites in Flash.
Are we predicting the resurgence of Flash then? No, but
like AMP or something like this.
It's what are your opinions on this, Ishan? Because the like, for example, the kind of things that Moovweb does with prefetching a lot of resources, pushing them closer to the device, that's probably like one of the directions that this is going, right? Into maybe more personalized, really a whole store in your device kind of approach. But what do you see?
I think it's definitely a possibility, although I think that's going to happen sooner than a 10-year time frame. I think what's going to happen in the medium term, let's call it the 5-year time frame, is that the prospect of decoupling, actually can make things more complicated in a smaller site, and you'll move slower. But in a large enterprise, when you decouple things move faster. And you'll find that, front-end Jamstack developers are maybe the most productive developers in history, because everything has been abstracted to some SaaS tool, whether it's, Stripe for your credit card or this and that. And we're finally, I don't know if people remember Java Beans and all these ways you'd get, or Calm way back in the day, but we're finally getting encapsulated real solutions and functionality that a front-end developer can just plug into their stack. And it becomes really fast to move and build, systems from the ground up, net new that way. I think there's some impedance mismatch with, shall we say, classic e-commerce systems that still needs to be sorted out. And that, I think, will make it really productive in the 5-year time frame. in a 10-year time frame, I don't know. I'd say, look, we'll actually be at two ends of the spectrum. We'll be doing HTML with portals and great client-side transitions, and then you'll also have WASM. So you think, JavaScript is bad now. When somebody's trying to ship, Python code running in the browser on top of WASM, just watch out. Or maybe it'll be super fast. I don't know. But we're going to have to start sharing the front-end space with developers of other languages, actually, potentially in that decade-long time frame. So it's going to be a wild world. I don't know exactly what's going to happen then.
What about your impressions, Belle?
Great. So I think in the short term, mostly this all will happen in the short term because we move really fast, and could be real the moment we ship this. But I think server components, as soon as they land, they will decrease considerably the amount of things that we ship in the bundle. And that's of course on the React ecosystem, but as well, like there's a lot of things that still as front-enders, sometimes we ship a lot of things unnecessarily to the client, but sometimes it's really needed. So that also pushes another issue that browsers do not have vendor third-party libraries built in. And if you check that, a big percentage of the web is run by Vue and run by React. Why do we need to fetch it elsewhere, right? So that's also a possibility that browser consider having something built in. Pushing also the functions as near as possible. I think that's a long term where we are able to push something to the very router of the street or whatever. That could be amazing. And I think also what we are going to realize over these few years or 5 years is that there's a strong technical debt for CMSs and e-commerce providers and data providers. So that the APIs and the CMSs and all of it should not have a say on how the UI is displayed. And what we've seen at Field and what happens at Field is that the way the API exposes the introspection data, so the whole JSON deeply nested stuff, it ends up creating a huge amount of code, and a considerable amount of code to normalize that content on the UI. So what I mean by this is that, yes, GraphQL attempts to solve this, but we are not using it correctly, in my opinion, because we still get those heavily nested nodes and bad applications of the pipeline, so of the network pipeline. So I think what we will see in the next 5 years is that we are badly using the network yet again to fetch extraordinarily amount of data, deeply nested data. So a lot of performance application can be done at the bundle level. Consolidation
then on the performance side, and maybe also seeing what the piping of the web, how it will evolve, and the possibilities there. Tim?
Ideally, the user should be able to tell the API, hey, I want the data like this. And every single API should be like this, instead of forcing you to use their schema. That's a bad practice, in my opinion, but it's a standard.
Commonplace nowadays. And Tim, Uniform is trying to solve this space as well, right? Trying to communicate the data from one provider to the other, ostensibly in the most performant way. How do you see this evolving in the coming, let's say now 5 to 10 years, because that's how all the answers have gone?
Well, it's a multifactored answer, I think. Based on what we just discussed, I think that will go rapidly, as we all said, right? Yeah. And I think, and I hope that it will also go more wider in different disciplines. I want creative people to be able to get the data from my live website, from my APIs, and design with actual data, things like that, right? It should go a more globalized thing between disciplines. But the controversial thing here is, I think between us, we are kind of in the elite field, right? We're doing amazing, cool stuff. All the companies represented here are probably the top 1% of our field. If you look at all the enterprise stuff I've worked with in my career, it's all based on jQuery, right? It's all the old school stuff. It's all the Java-based CMSs. I'm not saying they're bad. They're fine. These companies are doing well. They can just be doing much better if they use the software we are discussing. But honestly, in 5 years, that will not go away. What I do think is that all those suite approaches, right? The bigger systems, the Adobe AEMs, the AP servers, they're going to go mid-level market. And the stuff we are talking about are going to be the brands that are pushing forward, like the Nikes, the Chanels, these kind of high-end brands. They're going to use this technology and they're going to excel a lot. And the suites cannot cope with that, even though they try. They're trying hard, to be honest. It's not really working yet. They'll just go back slightly lower to brands with stakeholders that are not as mature yet. They don't really know how to do this whole composable, complicated architecture. So they go with the simpler thing, which is a suite, which gives you basically the whole thing. And they might evolve over time. But as you can see, let's say last year, Sitecore was still building the biggest websites. That's going to go down a bit because they don't know where to go in this whole new field. And you can see that companies like Moovweb and VueStoreFront, but also Vercel and Netlify are pushing that other thing. So there will be more of a divide. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
No,
these are the things that are happening that I see, because I'm on such a different level than you guys are, because I come from agency and I work with these clients and I have to talk to a CTO who doesn't know what Jamstack is, right? Yeah. And they're all like, right now I had this mandate, I don't work there anymore, so I can say it, where we say, oh yeah, but let's go Commerce Tools, VueStoreFront. And then the CIO of this huge group said, I don't want Commerce Tools. I want, what did they want? One of those other commerce ones that they say it's a cloud, but it's actually a monolith, just because of politics. And now this group that owns 50 luxury brands is not going to go this way because this guy doesn't like it, right?
As soon as we have like being correctly indexed by performance speed, I think that thread mail is going to be
really
hard.
Yeah,
that might be an interesting one. You're right. The web vitals might change the game.
Because it will be something that will show like this is needed, right?
I mean,
guys, didn't we think AMP was changing the game? It didn't.
No, I didn't think that.
Not even close.
But the idea actually was super amazing. And actually, this is how I would love to see the web development world in 5, maybe 10 years. Because, you know, like I love and hate Google for AMP because I love them because this idea is actually amazing. An idea of have some kind of cross-origin set of JavaScript and HTML that is actually served for all the pages and is shared. So right now, even when we are downloading things from CDN, every time we are entering a new website, we have to download them again. It is not shared. And this is awful because like when we are downloading Chrome, actually it would be great if we could cache things that we could reuse on other pages. This is not possible right now. And what AMP was trying to do, they were trying to deliver kind of like a standard library for the UI that is in the browser already and that is pre-rendered. And because of that, everyone can benefit from the same performance gains and user is not suffering from this because they already have that in their browser. And I would love to see something like this in the future. I know there were a few attempts even for some kind of libraries that are already downloadable from the browser. And I would love to see the JavaScript world, the front-end world heading into this direction where we have a set of tools that are considered as a safe choice for the performance because we know that they are already baked into the browser or they're popular enough that they are served from the CDN in thousands or like millions of pages. So most likely people already have them in a cache. Like I would love to see the industry going into this direction because that's actually the only way how you could make this globally. Because of course we could educate about Jamstack or writing static HTML website, anything like this, but this is not scaling that much because it involves actually it requires people to apply this, and people can apply this in a good way, people can apply this in a wrong way. This is just a trend, but this is not a systemic solution, and I would love to see a systemic solution.
I worry a lot about security with this. Because nowadays you have those CDNs that host, let's say, a jQuery version or a Vue version. What if this gets hacked and on the last 5 lines of a file, they put credit card skimming code? This shit happens, right?
Yes.
But you never look at those because they come from the same CDN you loaded in every website. And
Yes,
suddenly
yes.
you're hacked.
And that was actually the reason why this is not working like this anymore, because back
Exactly.
then when we had the resources from CDNs, they were actually cached and served on the other pages. I don't remember even where was this, but there was a time when it worked like this. But AMP was a nice attempt to actually do this right. Yes.
Yeah,
of
true.
course, it was.
AMP had a lot of great ideas in it. I mean, the engineering behind AMP is just amazing, and we've borrowed more than a few ideas from them.
Oh, cool.
But I want to go back to actually the central thing, which is we had said that core vitals may force people to actually start adopting Jamstack. Tim brought a really great point. Like, if you look at the amount of sites that use React, we all think it's either React or Vue or maybe Angular. But that's a really small percentage of the web.
That's really
Absolutely.
And we have gone and looked at, in the US, it's a US-centric index called the IR 500, the Internet Retailer 500, the biggest, and in e-commerce in the US. And we looked at the headless versus non-headless ones. And honestly, the headless ones weren't actually necessarily faster on average. It gets back to the amount of JavaScript that gets shipped. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Core Vital.
Yeah, the one thing I would love to resolve is like every time we would deliver a website first release, it always made all performance KPIs. It's always good. And then a week later, somebody adds third parties to this through Google Tag Manager or whatever.
Well, adding to that, people run only the web vitals in the landing page. So
of course, that's the nicest.
That's not even the
easiest thing to do.
experience. That's not even the experience that the user will have. So
Yeah, and that's only a top of the iceberg, actually.
indeed.
Yes, we could definitely
I love
explore.
commerce.
We could definitely explore all of this. I really thank you for those predictions that I hope we have an opportunity to dissect more when the web evolves, maybe in a future edition of the JS World Conference. I would really like to close by thanking you all again for being here. As Tim mentioned, I think that we have used each other's products in any way or the other, and
Yes.
we are all familiar with the kind of thing that we're doing to advance the web. I really hope we have an opportunity to see each other at some point in person in a future edition of one of the conferences that down the pipeline are coming. But for this panel, I would like to thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed
Thanks.
this.
Cheers.
Thank you all. Had a great time.
Thank you.